October the 23rd, 1942. El Alamein, the battlefield where the myth of Rommel's invincibility was finally shattered. The battle raged for 2 whole days before Rommel managed to reach his headquarters. However, there was little he could do to prevent the British 8th Army overwhelming his troops. As always, Rommel wrote home.
Dearest Lucy, the battle is going very heavily against us. We are simply being crushed by the enemy weight. At night I lie open-eyed, racking my brain for a way out of this plight for my poor troops.
After the first enemy breakthrough, Rommel reacted by sending a message to Hitler that the position couldn't be held and that we would have to resort to a fallback line.
The Führer replied, "In the situation in which you find yourself, there can be no other thought than to stand fast. Yield not a meter of ground, and throw every gun and every man into battle. As to your troops, you can show them no road other than that to victory or death." For the first time, Rommel understood the differences between himself and the leader he had so admired.
When Rommel received the order to hold all positions at the front to the last man, he was very shaken. I heard him say to the other officers who were with him in the car that he had no intention of sacrificing the Afrika Korps.
That's when he made the decision and said, "These brave soldiers have fought so hard and suffered so much. I'm going to get them out of here and lead them back to safety."
Against his Führer's orders, Rommel abandoned the El Alamein line, the first stage on the road to eventual defeat. On the Eastern Front, Hitler punished generals who had defied him and lost. But the Desert Fox was by now too important. His capture would have been a propaganda coup for the Allies, so in March 1943, a plane was sent to North Africa to fly Rommel back to Germany.
When we arrived at the airfield, Rommel said goodbye. And I have to say it was very hard for me. I had really grown close to him.
Helmut von Leipzig also escaped, but 230,000 German and Italian troops were forced to surrender. A greater capitulation than the one at Stalingrad a few months earlier. Back in Europe, Rommel mourned his lost African army.
At that time, he was already a lot more depressed. He made it obvious, through his comments, that he didn't agree at all with the way the High Command and Hitler were running things.
But when in late 1943, the Führer gave him a new and very public assignment, Rommel was relieved and delighted.
Im Sonderauftrag des Führers besichtigt Generalfeldmarschall Rommel die Befestigungsanlagen an der Atlantikküste. Neben den Offizieren werden auch erfahrene und bewährte Unteroffiziere zu der Besichtigung herangezogen.
In spite of the propaganda, Rommel was appalled by what he found. Outside of the heavily fortified ports along the coast, the Atlantic Wall barely existed.
One day I reported to Field Marshal Rommel. He said, there you are, lad. We're not in the desert anymore. We're in France. We have to keep an eye on the Atlantic wall, and you've got to help me.
When Rommel turned to Hitler for help, he was assured that his needs would take priority over everything else, including the Russian front. Rommel's faith in his Führer was reignited.
Im Hinblick auf unsere starken Anlagen, im Hinblick auf den vorzüglichen Geist unserer Truppe, auf die neue Bewaffnung und die Kampfmittel, die uns in die Hand gegeben sind, können wir den kommenden Ereignissen mit größter Ruhe entgegensehen.
Rommel was convinced that any Allied invasion could be defeated in the first 24 hours by a strategy of mobile defense. He therefore demanded that all 1,500 panzers in Western Europe should be deployed just behind the beaches. Hitler refused. Rommel's defenses were effectively immobilized, not knowing where or when the Allies would strike.
Wir haben ja monatelang vor der Invasion
For months before the invasion, it wasn't possible for any German reconnaissance aircraft to fly over the Channel to southern England to take pictures of what was going on there.
Aufnahmen zu machen, ob und was sich da vorbereitet.
In the face of the coming invasion, we were completely blind.
So Rommel had no choice but to try and fortify the entire Channel coastline. Once again, he used his talent for invention, designing many of the anti-invasion obstacles used on the beaches. The Allies, desperate to know what the Desert Fox was up to, sent commandos over to France. During one such expedition, George Lane, a Hungarian volunteer, was taken prisoner. He was brought by car to Rommel's headquarters at La Roche-Guyon.
Eventually we pulled up, and I looked around, and there was this beautiful castle nestling against rocks. I said, what an amazing place this is. And the Germans screamed at me, said, shut up, you're not allowed to talk. I was taken into a room, and then suddenly at the far end, I saw a man sitting behind a desk. And I looked again, and it was Rommel. And I thought that Rommel would want me to walk all the way to him, which would be an unnerving thing to do. But not a bit of it. Rommel got up, and Rommel walked all the way to me, which was an incredible thing to do. It's to make me feel easy. So it made me realize that he was far from an ordinary person.
Keen to obtain any information he could about the enemy, Rommel had saved Lane from certain execution.
Rommel looked at me and he said, you know, it is a great tragedy that you, the English, and us, the Germans, don't fight side by side against the Russians. That's what we should be doing. I told him that, in my opinion, we could never fight side by side because we had such completely different ideas about things. As, for instance, what? He said. I said, like, for instance, the Jewish question. The way you treat the Jews, we, in England, we could never do such a thing, you know. And he said, oh, well, that's a political thing, you know, and we soldiers, we don't think about that. And that was the end of the conversation. And I was taken to Paris, blindfolded, of course.
On the 4th of June 1944, Rommel checked the weather and the tides. Ruling out an imminent Allied invasion, he left for home in Germany to celebrate his wife Lutz's 50th birthday.
In the morning, his chief of staff, General Stylo, called my father early. I think it was around 7 or 7:30. He said, "There's big trouble on the coast. Apparently paratroopers have been dropped, but I'm not sure if it's the invasion yet. I'll call back when the situation is clearer." As far as I remember, Stylo didn't call back, so my father called him about an hour later, and Stylo said, "Yes, the landing has taken place." So my father immediately cancelled his visit, got into his car and drove to France.
As at El Alamein, Rommel was absent at the critical moment. By the time he was back in France, more than 100,000 Allied soldiers had landed.